Everyone join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. Everybody got here on this beautiful summer day.
Wow, that's some sun.
Right, yeah, sun, sure. Okay, let's approve the minutes of the June 18th, 2019 meeting, please. So moved. Mr. Baker?
Second.
Mr. Wilkins? All yes?
Yeah.
All right. There's no public comments, I'm assuming. No one here unless Sean's going to talk. Okay. No presentation reports. Let me give side of the table. Let's go to the administrative section. Have a motion to look at that? Fred?
Second.
And Carol seconded that one. Mr. Mickey?
Okay, item A is revised policy for 30-day public review and comment. Policy available at our county website under information, announcements, public review. And that's policy 5511, student dress and grooming. It's okay with the board. I just want to share some information with you. I'm going to step out here where I can see you and talk to you and answer questions that you may have. I see all of you have the revised agenda in or policy in your agendas, right? Sean, you have it?
Yep. Okay.
Certainly, those dress code guidelines and the discussion that we've had regarding such over the past month have gained a lot of attention. Not only from the comments that I've seen, it's been shared with me on social media, but just the feedback that I've received just via emails, phone calls from parents, employees, community members if I was out in town. So, I mean, there was lots of attention that came with our discussion regarding our students' dress and what's appropriate and not. And certainly people have strong opinions, one way or the other, regarding dress and what's appropriate. Of course, when we first had the concern come to us, my initial thought was we needed to look at some consistency in our dress code guidelines, because after just a short amount of time looking at what we currently have in place, realized that every school in the county had their own set of guidelines. And I really didn't wrap my head around it at the time. It took a while for me to do some research and kind of look into some things, kind of see how that had happened, that it finally dawned upon me. Actually, it was a conversation I had with a coordinator at the Department of Education. In 2011, the state policy 4373 on expected behaviors for our students spelled out that principals had the responsibility of developing guidelines for their individual schools with the assistance of their staff, parents, teachers, clearly, spelled out in that fashion. And looking at surrounding counties, I also realized that the same thing had happened in those counties as well. I'd go to a county's website. Some counties would have a dress code policy, some counties would not, but you could go to individual schools and look at their guidelines, and I noticed that they were not always the same. So what had played out here in Lincoln County had played out in other counties as well, not just locally, I know now, but statewide, as a result of what happened in 2011. So I guess, a month or so now has passed since this first came to us, and I've come full circle in terms of what I believe, I guess my opinion, that our schools, well, actually, I guess part of that is because of the conversations that I've had with our employees and some of our administrators in particular, who are responsible for implementing and upholding the dress code, that they still want that responsibility of being able to determine what those guidelines are going to look like. This idea or notion of having one set of guidelines for me that would be applicable to all grade levels at first made sense but then after going through this process, doesn't so much now. You know, we've got K-5 school, we have K-5 or pre-K-5 schools, we have pre-K-8 schools, we have a middle school, Guy Valley, you know, we have a high school. So what's appropriate for dress in grade school may not be appropriate for middle school and high school. You know, a lot of attention came from the committee's recommendation regarding, you know, the 3-inch inseam and all the discussion that generated. Some people were, you know, especially if they were parents of elementary kids, the ones I'd spoken to, could see the benefit of such a guideline. Middle school and high school, that was not the case. But, you know, that doesn't make any sense. Some people were opposed to that idea altogether of having some particular length of inseam. Others thought it was a good idea, but thought it should have been longer, you know, 5 inches or 7 inches. And that goes back to what I said a few moments ago, is people have such varying opinions or, you know, thoughts about what would be appropriate for students to wear to school. Now, policy 4373, that's the state's policy, has been changed again. And obviously the state board's kind of gotten out of the dress code business, because now there's only one small section in there that says or pertains to boards that want to implement uniforms, school uniforms for students to wear. So there's a section in there that's 3 or 4 paragraphs long. At the very end of that section in policy, it makes the statement that dress codes for local boards is, you know, an option. So you can either do it, you can have one, or not. So as I reviewed the policy that we currently have in place and looked at the guidelines that we have in place, and having those discussions with teachers and administrators, and it's my suggestion, I guess, is what I'm saying here today, that we continue to give the schools the flexibility of developing those guidelines with the consistency that would come about the way the policy has been revised upon my approval. So whatever the schools would come up with, or committees, principals, and I don't expect that there's going to be anything happen with our current dress code guidelines at the school level as a result of this policy going into effect, other than Ranger Elementary. And Ranger does not have a set of guidelines. It just simply references our county dress code. And in policy 4373, I guess I need to mention this too, the principal is the person ultimately that still has a responsibility of holding how the students dress. And what's changed now is that in the past, the policy would simply tell or dictate to the administrator what level of violation the dress code would be, whether it's a level 1, level 2, level 3, or level 4. But now it's upon the principal to make that decision. So the way I understand the policy now, depending upon the violation, the level of the dress code violation, you know, it may be something that's offensive to a minority of students, let's say, that a student may wear to school or something. And I'm just using that as an example off the head. But I mean, it is possible in my mind, and looking at the policy, depending on what happens with the dress code violation, I mean, it may be something that would even warrant a possible suspension. So, I mean, it could just be a warning, you know, hey, don't wear that again, you know, it's not appropriate, up into possibility of someone being suspended for it. So, the policy then that you have, the board would authorize each school to establish a reasonable dress code in order to promote a safe and healthy school setting, subject to the approval of the superintendent. And then it says the superintendent will develop guidelines which, and it talks about designating the principal as the arbiter of student dress and grooming in the building, and inviting the participation of staff, parents, and students. And looking at our current guidelines, Our guidelines would fall right in line with this policy. And also, not only that showing that it's the principal's responsibility in consultation with staff, but it also, our guidelines indicates that it's essential that any restrictions on students also apply to central office administrators, building administrators, and all professional staff. So, you know, we're not going to have one set of expectations for our students and not uphold our employees to that same level. And I may have left something out that I wanted to tell you, but I'll take a breath. If you've got any questions, ask me while I'm back through my notes.
Jeff, back when we had the parent from Guyan Valley and parents, I guess, different people there, I think that her purpose in coming was that the enforcement of the dress code of Guyan Valley wasn't consistent. That, I guess, still remains there for, you know, is that something you're going to emphasize to principals and teachers, that they need to be consistent in doing that?
Yes, now, I've been meeting with principals. This is the time of year that, you know, I conduct their performance evaluations, and we've been talking about this already. And when the principals come back, when they're back, everybody's full go around the 1st of August, and we bring our principals in, that's going to be the very first subject or topic of conversation that we're going to have, is about that what you're saying, consistency is, and how we uphold the dress code. So yes, that's like I said, it's on all the principals' minds. I mean, everyone that I've spoken to, they're quite familiar that, you know, we've had some discussion about coming up with a set of consistent guidelines.
You really don't anticipate, other than Ranger submitting the dress code to you this school year? Cannot we all assume then that you've reviewed the present school dress codes and are content with them?
I have, and most of them are. I think there's some consistency there already, that they're covering the areas that state policy says that needs to be in place. So,
but you would still be open, should a school and the faculty and community, whomever, should they feel that they needed to revise theirs, they could revise it and submit it to you for any changes they might see that are necessary?
yes.
That could happen anytime.
And that's how it will work, and I'll give them that opportunity right out of the gate if that's what they so desire to do.
Let me ask this question. As I understand, I believe it's 4373, it authorizes but doesn't require guidelines. We haven't had any problems at Ranger with dress coding, have we? Is there a requirement being put on Ranger? I mean, seems to me that there's no guidelines at Ranger, there have been no problems, the administration's handling it. Why do they need guidelines?
Well, because our policy now indicates that there should be guidelines developed by the principal.
Doesn't say it to be written though, does it?
It says in each school.
So I think, Mr. Baker,
First paragraph, the end of it.
so that there is that consistency that as far as,
Established?
Each school to establish.
Established, that doesn't say in writing or anything else. I mean, to me, we're in a worse place now than we were before this whole debacle started with this policy. Because we now specifically say the principal as the arbiter of student dress and grooming in his or her building. That's basically saying you've got absolute authority. So I won't be shocked at all if we get a level 4 violation out of a school for the exact same outfit that's never raised at another school. And then I don't know how we're going to handle it. There's no perfect solution to any of this. I understand and agree with what you're trying to do, but I don't understand why we would require a school that doesn't have any dress code issues when nothing, even our own policy we're putting on for public review for 30 days, requires development of a written set of guidelines.
somewhere along the way, and I don't know how it happened, and this is where I'm kind of gray. When I talked to the department, some of the folks that was there, 8 years ago have since retired or no longer there, but at that time in 2011, Rowdy, there should have been a set of guidelines developed at each one of our schools. So somehow, I don't know, what took place.
I mean, there is a set, it
But it-
references this policy, right?
Well, it just comes back to, right, our county policy.
Which county policy embodies the things we want to happen without dictating how they're to happen. Right?
Okay. But I've had two conversations with Mrs., I won't call her name, but I will just get with Christina. And she already has some folks that sit down with her, and they've already scratched something out to share with you. But it sounds like it's gonna be very familiar, or very similar to what a couple of other schools.
But the way this reads to me now, in the first paragraph at the end of here, it seems to, I don't know how you have to put it in writing. It says, subject to the approval of the superintendent. Well, how would the superintendent know what your policy was if you didn't have something to present to them? Unless maybe you've done orally.
And that's not really, what you're seeing there, Rowdy, is not really a revision to our policy. I only went in there and changed a couple of sentences actually in the actual policy from what was already in place. Because our policy really reflected what policy 4373 has said for the last, 8 years.
Well, the dress code, on the last sentence here, the dress code shall be incorporated into the student code of conduct or disciplinary code, where there are, I guess, I forget exactly how that's stated, but it's not specific, but implies that there should be a certain degree of decorum, or whatever you want to call it, I guess.
Can I ask a quick question? Is there a difference, is there a distinction here between the school's guidelines and what are being called administrative guidelines?
There is, because the administrative guidelines is really just placing the responsibility upon the principal,
Okay, it's.
subject to
Right.
my approval.
So the administrative guidelines are what make the policy work,
Right.
but the school guidelines are,
Is going to be
Separate,
the actual,
right.
nuts and bolts of what
Okay.
the expectations are for dress.
gotcha.
So that is confusing. Like a 2-3 defense.
When I get into that.
That's,
Okay, anybody else have anything yet, or any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Mr. McKipp. It's your recommendation, we'll go from here.
and I'm sure I'll get some comment, I'll get feedback on this policy, there's no question.
Well, that's the reason I asked earlier, should a school feel the need to revise theirs, they would be able to whenever they so
Yeah,
chose.
but going back to Rowdy's statement a moment ago, he's dead on, he's 100% right in terms of how principals will now have the responsibility regardless of what the behavior is, Rowdy. I'm not talking about just discipline because of inappropriate dress, but the state board has now revised the policy in such a manner that does not prescribe to principals how they are to discipline a student for any violation. It
That's
now
good.
has reversed that process or placed it squarely upon the school administrator to determine at what level of violation that whatever the situation may be, reaches.
For all disciplinary actions?
It's,
Which is.
Oh, God, that's gonna be great.
Which goes back to the way things used to be.
yeah, so it's well beyond just dress code, Brad.
Well, it's also so you can expel students and not be counted against them.
That's what happened. This was all prompted by the federal requirement that we had to have these metrics in place for accountability purposes, one of which for West Virginia's behavior. And principals were reluctant to suspend students this past year, knowing that they would take a hit on the accountability scorecard when it come out in the fall. So because of that, Ms. Krieger, right, that's why this is happening. So,
Well, and again, it all comes back to reasonable administration, common sense administration. So long as we have that, all will be kosher. When we don't, that's when we have problems.
And that's the way it was when you were in school. Principals, when you were in school, didn't have guidelines, I'm gonna do this, and so-and-so does that.
Well, Gerald Hartley grabbed you by the hair of the head, threw you out in the hall, wearing you out, bring you
Well,
back
I'm not talking
in.
about corporal punishment.
GH, right? No
There
names
were,
here.
there were
GH.
no disciplinary problems for the remainder of the day from anybody after someone got one of those, I promise you, normally a week.
But Mr. Wilkerson, you know, he didn't have any specific guidelines that tell him what happened if a person did X. He had discretion, as did the other principals. So you still might see, at that time, you know, depending on what school you attended, there might be some differences. And Bill's seen the same thing.
It's going to be interesting to kind of watch this unfold this coming.
When he gets back to what Rowdy said, the administrator needs to be reasonable and consistent.
Well, let me ask you this question then, Mr. Superintendent. This one's always burned me up. Let's say that we have a student who attacks, student A attacks student B. Student B defends him or herself in that situation. Who gets suspended?
That's a good question.
Because let me tell you what, when you suspend them both, you just violate the constitutional right to student B, who has a right under the state and the United States Constitution to defend himself, no matter when or where, so long as their defense is lawful. And if you're attacked and you fear for your safety, you are allowed to defend yourself under both constitutions. So that, it's always been, right, at times all been the policy that if you're involved in a fight, whether you're the aggressor or not, you both get suspended. Well, I hope we never get one of those before us.
Me too.
Because, I mean, I've just told you what the constitutional argument is. And I was in that situation in school. In that situation where I got attacked, I defended myself, didn't throw a punch, and I got suspended for half a day. And then the principal was begging me to come back to school after my dad finished with him and the superintendent at the time. But that is the one situation that has always bothered me. What do you tell, as a parent, what do I tell my kids? You go to school and if somebody starts welling you, you sit there and take it with your hands calmly at your side. Nope. I told him, Daddy will take care of you, but not everybody's daddy's lawyer. So that one is one that, like I said, I hope we never have to deal with it because I know how I feel on it, strongly feel on it. But under this new policy, a principal would have discretion not to expel both in that situation, correct?
Sure.
So I like it from that perspective.
You wait and see what happens.
We would always,
It's going to be an interesting year.
Well, it's going to be a learning
we would
curve.
always encourage students that felt like they were being mistreated or bullied to, you know, go to a teacher or someone in authority as the first option.
Yeah, if you can't do that, somebody walks up and knocks you in the back
Well,
of the head.
if there's a teacher right nearby and something happens, then possibly could, but others, depending on the circumstance.
Right, I mean, you take a school though like LCHS, with staffing issues, you can't have someone everywhere that there could be a fight. We'd like to, something we talked about, I don't remember what context recently, about different allocation of resources there to cover more areas, but you're not always going to be able to prevent that. That's not always an outside possibility that situation is going to develop, and it's one that's just always stuck in my craw.
Joey got, he said, she said, nobody
Steve, you mean
witnessed.
to tell me you would tell your child to turn their back on that person and walk away?
Depending on the circumstances. But, you know,
Depending on,
right, but
not
my
if they're
point is this,
swinging.
should there be nobody around, and this happens, and one, it was, you know, obviously one attacked the other. There's no witnesses, so when you come, but they come before you, both, he's putting, no, that's not the way it happened, this is the way it happened. And it's
Yeah,
the
but in
same
this
thing.
day and age though, you're going to have witnesses.
Well,
Somebody's got a videotape and put it on
Maybe.
YouTube, right?
Maybe, or maybe not, I
It's
just
just
think
like
you
the
don't
dress
know.
code. People have strong opinions in that situation too, because I've dealt
I
with that
felt
for
mine, you
years.
come out of there like
Yeah.
a wildcat, you knocked that
Well,
out of them.
it was always, you know, fighting is fighting.
But how it's handled,
Both are-
the discipline is, you know, I don't know if the new policy guidelines, what that's gonna mean. And it goes back to, you know, administrators kind of handle those situations differently too sometimes. I mean, you know, I know there's not consistency, but that's really just a result of how the policy is
I'd
written.
rather them take their punishment than not to let somebody beat the
Yeah.
crap out of them.
Because I know even for fighting, in the current policy, it spells out options for the administrator. But with the new policy now, you know, it could be
Sean,
this,
don't
this,
print
this.
that because everybody.
No, it's just broadcast. Don't worry about it, Brandon. It's on the YouTube.
One of these
video.
days, I'll figure
You're
it
gonna
out.
learn discretion one of these days, Carol.
You're new, Carol.
Lincoln County fighting everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else,
okay.
Mr. McKee?
So that's where we are with the policy. We'll see how much feedback that we receive, of course, and we've got 30 days to make any revisions.
So heck, the way I see it, with all this new flexibility and interpretation, dress code issues gonna be way down here on the bottom of the list that you all have to deal with, principals and,
I think you're
administration
right.
has to deal
I mean,
with.
It
But
really
we
wasn't that big a concern to be, you know.
Yeah, it
before.
wasn't.
But yeah, it's, with the new change in the policy and what's going on with the federal guidelines as far as accountability is concerned, this is gonna be an interesting year.
Well, like what Fred brought up there, it could also lead to stricter enforcement, which could discourage some of the inappropriate behavior.
Right, that's true. That's true as well.
Okay.
All
thank you.
right.
You're still on.
I'm still up. I'm
You're just
going
going to
to
another,
item.
you're just going to another letter.
Item B, out-of-state travel for Polly Smith to Washington DC for the Model Schools Conference, June 23rd through 26th, 2019. This is coming to you late because somewhere in the shuffle, we lost her paperwork. So I don't know what happened, but she's there now. So we need to get the board approval.
Somebody dropped out, I think.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, somebody dropped out.
Polly came.
We'd already paid for the room and all that stuff that she replaced.
Well, Mr. King had shared with me. It's just been a while, so.
All right.
Anyway, so that's
Okay.
why it's on there like it is.
All right, thank you. Okay, we have two items there. Everybody in favor of all those, both administrative items, is that all yes vote?
Yes.
All yeah. Okay. Finance motion, please.
So moved.
Brownie?
Second.
Carol seconded that one. Who's ready today?
I'll take it. I'll take it. I know you were prepared. Item A is a schedule of invoices totaling $718,617.64. 718,617.64. Item B, Lincoln County Schools payroll schedule for fiscal year 2019-2020. Item C is budget supplements totaling $1,323,131.50. And you have a handout that was provided you that has this information. It's, I think Susie laid it up there, here it is. It's these documents. Sean, you got a copy?
Okay.
And.
I think Robin sent that out to us today.
She did. Item D is budget transfers totaling $3,609,481.69. Of course, the end of the year, I've spoken to Ray several times the last couple of days. It's going in and making things zero out, line up, match. So whatever the original grant was to begin with, to start the year, making sure that we're adding money or taking money away from each one of those grants, that everything zeroes itself out at the end, so.
Well, now this bill they passed last evening, that's gonna change how some of these people get paid too.
It is.
Math teachers and special ed teachers get 3 more years of service credit. So that'll change how much the payroll's gonna be.
Susie and I was talking this morning, that's like, these teachers that have missed 4 days or less this coming year will get a $500 bonus at the end of the year. They didn't include service employees in that.
Oh, they didn't?
Somebody tried to amend that, didn't they?
So,
Sorry.
and we've been held up on getting our contracts out because we didn't know if we were going to see the pay raise come to fruition or not. Leslie had given us some guidance and actually had given us, she said, you won't need to wait just a couple more days just to make sure, see what happens. So we've held off and Susie I know she's been anxious here because we've talked about this several times, making sure, you know, we get those contracts out.
But, well, what I was getting at, Ray, and last time he was at last meeting, I think, he was talking about he had included a pay raise in her budget. Well, now I have to go back and revise that,
You like to-
because they've added this 3 years service to their.
Oh, so,
As a means to attract
Yeah,
people to teach
yeah.
math.
but that, do you know if that's funded, by the state?
State's
So
funds.
the county's not going to take that. So then whole new categories in there.
Devil's in the details, we'll wait and see what comes down.
Sure is. Okay. All right. Anybody have any questions or concerns about the financial items? Not that on all yes vote?
Yeah.
All yes on that one. Board members, any comments, concerns? Anything? Anyone? Mr. Hickey, it's you.
I'm just gonna mention Guy Valley's Gymnasium, the work is ongoing. I stopped over there today, and, they're putting down plywood now, and then I guess they'll come back over top of that with the actual, gym floor. And I mentioned to, Carol a couple of weeks ago, because when Lenny was here, several weeks back, had mentioned maybe a fundraiser with the old gym floor. So I stopped over there, you know, I was interested myself in having a piece of that floor. When they pulled that floor up, Karen, it just splintered into, I mean, there's not anything in there that's really, as I can see, salvageable that you would even want to be able to do things. And it was so, in such bad shape. I mean, it was paper thin in places. I can't believe that, you know, there wasn't some holes out there in some places in the gym, so.
Really had water on there, didn't it?
I mean, I knew it was bad, but I didn't realize just how bad it was till I saw it today. No wonder that company had no interest in that floor. So, but it's been removed. It's out there in those dumpsters. And it's exciting. I can't wait to see that floor. I know you all feel the same way. The floor, the new bleachers, it's gonna be nice.
Now, the new floor, is it finished when it's put down, or do they have to come back and?
They'll have to come back, finish the paint.
Finish.
Yeah. I think it's the same company does that too. I'll get Greg on the upcoming agenda today for him to give the board an update on what we're doing maintenance wise. Because I know Duval, the sewer treatment plant work has begun.
Yeah, obviously, because of the rain, they're not making much progress. Pretty much been a standstill this week. I guess the same way with the roof.
Yeah, I saw the
Insulation,
material.
the insulation's up there, but that's about it.
So, yeah, we have some projects going on out there, so I'll get Greg to come to an upcoming meeting, give you an update, kind of where we are.
We're running out of places to dump the dirt and gravel and so forth up there. Duval. They have stuff piled up everywhere.
Yeah, I saw it yesterday, before yesterday.
Anything else, Jeff?
That's all I have.
All right, if no one has anything else, let's adjourn until Tuesday, July the 2nd, 2019, 6 p.m. here at the county office. Do you have a motion to do that?
So moved.
Mr. Wilkerson, seconded by whom?
I
Me.
second.
Carol. Carol seconds that. All yes?
Yes.
All yes.